Hey guys, I hope you're well. First of all, apologies again for using a shitty webcam to record this video, but hopefully I'll be able to replace my cameras again soon. Big question for today. Why did publishers seem to abandon horror? And I think it's a pretty fair question because if we look at gaming, movies, even TV series, it's very clear people love horror. You know? For example, although to be fair, movies have gotten a little bit lazy, they rely more on loud noises and sudden movements. They rely too heavily on jump scares. Very lazy in my opinion. If you really want a proper immersive horror experience these days, I think it's the horror gaming genre that you need to turn to, with things like Dead Space, Silent Hill, all those classics. Alien Isolation, fuck me, that was a bottle tester. That was relentless. Anyway, I'm getting off track a wee bit. Publishing in horror. Well, I looked into it, right, because I don't know if you've noticed. You can probably tell looking at me, I've got grey hairs in the beard. I've got a few years on me now. And I remember when I was growing up, you could find sort of mid-list horror everywhere. Everywhere. Hang on a second. Things like this. This is a rare find these days, right? Author you've never heard of, story you've never heard of, just paperback, pulp, horror, right? The stores used to be full of these. You remember the little revolving racks that we used to get that had the books on them? And books like that, they would sort of be maybe at the bottom, hidden behind a couple. Or you'd be able to go into like thrift stores or second-hand stores and pick up books like that all the time. They were everywhere. Well, I miss that. I miss that a lot because horror's definitely my genre. I love it. Regardless of the platform, as I previously mentioned, I especially love gaming, love books. And I miss it. But publishers seem to have shied away from horror despite the fact that it very clearly sells. People clearly love to be scared. And I looked into it a little bit, and it seems to me like there was a bit of a perfect storm of bad things that happened that essentially killed horror in mainstream publishing. The first thing, there was a court case which I cannot remember the name of. I think it was the Thor Power Tool versus Commissioner, something like that. Anyway, it essentially was a tax ruling that made it more expensive to store books in like a warehouse, and so they ended up literally pulping them, destroying them, because it worked out cheaper. And so that went away. But around the same time as well, there were a couple of publishers. I think it was Zebra and Leisure specifically. Whereas on the success of Stephen King and Dean Koontz and those guys, they were pumping out books. And it just sort of oversaturated the market. And the problem at the time is a lot of them were quite poorly written, not very well thought out even. They'd have nonsensical plots, and a lot of them as well would just be over the top gore. And I think that turned a lot of readers off, and that again made publishers shy away from the genre. And essentially what they've done now is they've sort of rebranded it. Because we do get horror, but it's very occasional. Like The Girl with All the Gifts. That was an absolutely fantastic story. Or, what was the Swedish guy called? Lindqvist? He wrote the book Let the Right One In. And he's quite a popular horror author. And we've got Joe Hill as well, but he's got that family legacy. Stephen King is his dad. But other than that, we don't really see it. The only thing we've really got is what's appearing on the indie scene and indie publishing. But that's really just an ocean of slush. Sorry, I'm sick. That's really just an ocean of slush. And it's usually poorly written. I mean, there are exceptions to this, right? I'm not talking about all, but finding a good horror story in amongst all of that is fucking difficult. You know, it's quite often unedited, poorly written, and usually about fucking zombies. Let's be honest, that seems to be the main horror trope. Zombies. And yeah, I love a good, I love a good zombie story. Give me a bit of Resident Evil or The Walking Dead or, whatever. But I think in the indie scene, it's kind of been done to death. And yeah, these are all the things that have really contributed to the death of it. And they've rebranded horror as psychological thriller. Which, I mean, they put out books which quite heavily deal with grief a lot of the time, or something like that. There's always some kind of metaphor. Whereas when we look at the pulp days, that was the B movies of horror, your creature features. It was just good, scary fun. And I miss that. I think a lot of people miss it as well. Anyway, I'm interested to know, what do you guys think? Is horror ever going to make a comeback in the world of publishing? And again, I'm not talking about the indie scene. I mean mainstream publishing. It clearly sells. I definitely think we need to make an effort to try and bring it back. I would like that. Even the mid-list horror, the creature features. Bring that stuff back. It was good fun. Anyway, let me know what you think. Do you miss horror? Like proper horror? Like when it was everywhere and it was just good fun? Or are you quite happy without it? You'll just stick to lazy movies? Or you're Stephen King, although to be fair, he doesn't really write horror that much that often. I think the last one really was The Outsider. Anyway, I'm rambling a bit now. This is what happens when I don't have notes. Right? So, let me know what you think. Right? Take care, guys. I'll speak to you again soon.